I think the right way to look at that is through the lens of alignment, meaning like, is everyone marching not only in the same direction, but in step with each other? Is like the cadence of what folks are doing stacking so that you're doing better as a team than you would individually. Functionally, I heard one measure of that, which is probably not a great actual real world measure, but gets the idea across, is that the more alignment goes up, the more your communication overhead goes down. But in practice, to maintain that alignment, there's a good amount of built-in communication overhead.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today we look at employee alignment and what that really means as a company grows and scales. What I know from my experience more than a decade as an executive coach in leadership development is that companies change and sometimes you lose employee alignment and you have to figure out a way to get it back. Well, we've got a great episode with you today. The CEO and co-founder of Nylas. Nylas is a multi-Inc. 5,000 level company, 140 employees. We're with Gleb Polyakov. Hopefully I got that pronounced right. But Gleb and I talk about employee alignment and how do they reconnect to it? How do they, all sit down together and figure out what was missing and really figure out a way to move forward? Well, a lot of that is unpacked for you today in today's special episode on employee alignment. When you think about your own journey as a leader, my hope is that you're evolving and you're transforming. And if you don't see that in yourself, then we need to talk. We need to really look at what's missing inside of this approach. Because if you do what you've always done, if you think what you've always thought, if you are not really challenging yourself, if you're not engaging in conversations that allow you to accept new ways of seeing the world, then you're going to probably get what you've always gotten. You may grow, you may have, incremental growth over time, but many of my clients are seeing transformational type growth. Maybe they're doubling their company or tripling their company over a 2 or 3 year period, but they're actually running it differently. They're moving and transforming things inside this. Now, one of the tools that we use is leadership effectiveness evaluation, which is a special tool that I've designed working with my clients, and I'm going to offer it to you. If you're listening to this podcast, then all you have to do is go to genehammett.com and schedule your call today and tell me that you heard it on the podcast. And that makes it absolutely free for me to share with you the 7 dials of how managers are turning into leaders and what's really, how do you measure the effectiveness of your leadership across your organization. A lot of people find this valuable because it gives them insight on where to focus. And we talk about some of the things that can work for them and develop a plan that's prioritized and fits into what they're doing right now. I will tell you, this leadership effectiveness evaluation is very valuable to you if you want to make a transformation in your business. All you have to do is go to genehammett.com and let's have that chat. Just mention that you had it on the podcast. Now, here's the interview with Gleb. Gleb, how are you?
Doing good. Great to be on, Gene.
We're going to have a great conversation. It really is an exciting topic to talk about, communication and how we're scaling companies. Before we dive into that, I'd love for you to tell us about your company, Nylas.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's topical. We're a communications company. So we're an API platform. We're a developer tool, if you will, that helps folks build communication flows into what they're doing. Specifically, we help you with email, calendar, and contacts information. We're the only provider for contextual email, meaning we connect directly into an inbox and let you build that into the user flow, whether it's a sales tool like a Sales Loft or an Outreach or any kind of CRM flow, or if you're trying to pull out the unstructured data that lives only in a mailbox, things like tracking numbers, things like merchant invoices, things like the contents of the messages themselves that you might use for a plethora of beautiful use cases. At the end of the day, what we do as a business is that we make it easy for you to automate in software some of those super critical alignment flows. What we want to do at the end of the day is unlock that human potential. We want to help the world do things better, make it easier, lower the barriers of entry for people trying to build rich applications in whatever space they're in. And that does come down to communication, right? over the past 10,000 years, it's been energy, transportation, and communication technologies that changed the world the most. And that should make sense, right? Everyone lives in a world made of physical objects. We've got to move those around if we want to do business, especially business with people who aren't within arm's reach of us. We've got to heat our homes. We've got to power the stuff we build. And one of the few things we do that's all that special as a species is that we talk to each other. The more people are on the same message, the more people are saying the same thing, we end up going to the moon. We win wars. We have revolutions. The quality of life goes up for everyone. And it's those technologies like a radio, the printing press, the internet itself that have driven so much, not just great social change and access to knowledge, but enter us into the next phase. They're that little phase shift that lets a new technology boom start again as more and more minds get connected, have the opportunity, I guess, to enter the marketplace of ideas and see which ones win out.
Well, Gleb, I want to ask you one more follow-up question on kind of the technology that you're doing, and I have no idea what you guys are doing with AI, but where do you see AI impacting and integrating into what you guys are building?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say something like 20-ish% of our customers, of our revenue, comes through AI-powered products. This is different from like the LLMs that are popular as of recording, the OpenAI style ones, the ChatGPTs. But there's still a natural language processing neural net model that looks and pulls out from the contents of your mailbox or your calendar contact graph, the combination of all of those, what you're trying to get at. So I want to pull out the receipts of everything you've purchased over the past year. A lot of them only exist in your mailbox if it's a digital good. Certainly, it's the only place you can automate that kind of information. So we have AI features that we run on our side to do the NLP to pull that out. With the ChatGPTs, the LLM revolutions, I get extremely excited because it's again a tool that lowers the barrier of entry for people to do cool stuff. It's also one of my favorite analogies for what ChatGPT is it's a code interpreter, but instead of having to learn Python or whatever, the language is English. So you get to figure out how to write programming by being clear, concise, being able to collaborate with others. And I think it's a push in the exact right direction. So it's a technology that increases the need for clarity, increases the need for a vision, increases the need for being able to explain something, if not to another person, then to a machine to get full utility. I'm just super excited for my company, certainly on the product side. We've been doubling down there. And most of all, I'm just so deeply stoked about what the potential implications are for us internally. How can we take advantage of this productivity boost ourselves to do better?
Well, amazing to know that you guys have made the Ink list so many times, and you are building a strong team. My numbers in front of me show about 140 employees. Is that about right?
That's right. Yeah.
It takes a lot of focus to create that kind of scale. You go through different inflection points too. You change over time. So what used to work doesn't work anymore. And communication was one of the things that you have shared with my team that is a critical element of you guys being where you are success-wise. How do you look at communication across your company?
When you say look, do you mean like oversee? Or
How do you define it? How do you improve it? What are the things that you're looking at as a company is trying to communicate more efficiently?
Got it. No, 100%. I think the right way to look at that is through the lens of alignment, meaning like, is everyone marching not only in the same direction, but in step with each other? Is like the cadence of what folks are doing stacking so that you're doing better as a team than you would individually. Functionally, I heard one measure of that, which is probably not a great actual real world measure, but gets the idea across, is that the more alignment goes up, the more your communication overhead goes down. But in practice, to maintain that alignment, there's a good amount of built-in communication overhead. And it's something that we had a large growth curve too, because we're around 80 or so people when the pandemic started. And what we found is that, and we really fell flat on our faces here, I'm not afraid to say, is we kept growing. The pandemic did really, really well for us. We ended up scaling above 200 people, I think above 250 people through the pandemic. We had raised a couple more rounds. I think during the pandemic, we raised 120 some million in additional VC capital. And so we were hiring up. We had a very, very tight-knit focused culture pre-pandemic. Pandemic hit. We really coasted on the momentum that we had before that. But as we kept hiring up, as we kept growing, we never really revisited a lot of the mores, a lot of the everything from the vision of why people are here to the way that work is being done now that the office situation changed dramatically. And so what we saw was a huge loss of focus, a huge loss of that communication flow and alignment. And it's been the work of the past a year and a half of us getting back on track and getting realigned, by which, when I think about that, I mean, people feel safe to say what they mean, to disagree or agree. People are talking about the actual problems in the business together and how they're going to solve it. And folks are oriented on what we're going to do next together, as opposed to trying to describe the problem or trying to assign blame.
So when you think about communication now, as you went through this inflection point, is there anything specifically you guys had to shift to find more alignment and to make the transition that you went through?
We had to take a conscious look, and I don't mean like me and my co-founder, I mean us as a company, the entire team, at why we were there, what we were all trying to accomplish together. And we had a lot of help from folks that had done it before us and trying to get back on the same page. But why does anyone communicate, right? Why do we talk to each other? It's because we're trying to either get better connected, like emotionally, or because we're trying to accomplish something together. And usually, if not always, it's hard to pull those two apart. You've got to do both at once if you're on a team. So for me, when I think about communication, it's a channel through which collaboration happens. It's how productivity happens anywhere at the end of the day. I mean, it's a product bet that paid off for us on the API side. Is like, well, we're the only game in town if you want to connect into the contents of a mailbox and use that information. That's super relevant because regardless of what app you're using, regardless of what service you're on, it's the bottleneck that everything passes through. And inside a company, similarly, regardless of what your values are, what processes you have, who your customer is, you still at the end of the day have to talk to each other, talk to them to get things done. So you should figure out, why am I doing that? What are we trying to do together? Am I on board for that? What is the way, if I am on board, that I'm going to work with these people? And so we actually, this last February, we got the entire team for a week-long trip to Vegas, because rooms are $40 a night, not because we love gambling. It just has a bunch of excess meeting capacity. But we went to the Strat casino there for a week, when we all talked about, what are we doing? First, on a personal level, because it's really hard to care or resonate with a company value if you don't understand what your own are. And then we distilled that down into, who are we as a business? Who are we as a company and team? How do we work together?
Now, Gleb just mentioned coasting on culture. Now, this happens. We focus on the work, we focus on the next milestone, the next delivery, the next version of our software, whatever it may be. But if we look back and we realize we haven't been intentional about our culture, then you're going to have a hard road ahead of you. I'm here to tell you, I've worked with a lot of companies that are trying to turn around the culture, and it isn't just easy. It's actually very hard because people get ingrained, they get entitled, and there's some toxic behaviors that have to be addressed in order for you to be able to have the kind of culture that you really are proud of and that aligns people together. This whole episode is on employee alignment. You want to have the right processes in place to be intentional about culture, and that's really critical as your company is growing and scaling. In fact, you have inflection points that make it virtually impossible to do what you used to do to make it work. When you cross over 100 employees, it changes drastically. There's one thing to keep in mind as your company is growing and scaling. It also changes at other levels in the company. And I have the experience to be able to help you with that. If I can help you in any way, make sure you let me know. Back to Gleb. Now, that's a pretty interesting set of goals when you sit down to do this. As a technology company, I would imagine you have a lot of technical people that are not necessarily good at communicating with each other, not comfortable doing it. It's just something that we have to do. So how did you engage them to find the new alignment for the company?
First, the one philosophy we have on the Nylas side is that my job as CEO is to make you as rich and as famous as you want to be. No one is staying at companies for 10, 20 years anymore. That's just not the state on the ground. So my job, my goal, if you're on the team, is to make sure that you're leaving with more skills, a better network, more experience than you entered in. It's one of the, I think, best places to be in a startup, because I fully believe that a month of startup time is worth a year of enterprise experience, hands down. I'll fight anyone who wants to challenge that. The way we got to there was, and you're right, like a lot of people, technical or not, I don't think the role actually matters all that much, though. Some roles tend to draw more of the introverted type than others. People don't often get time in their career, and I'm sure you know this quite well on the executive coaching side, to literally sit down and put on paper what their goals are and what they're doing on a personal level. So one of the first exercises we did, speaking of vulnerability and being authentic, is we were talking about, okay, bring tomorrow a picture of yourself from when you were between 8 and 12. And we gave the assignment the night before. You're like, oh, but I'll have to call my mom. I'm like, good, you'll go talk to your mother. Or dad, or whoever guardian figure is important in your life to get that information. I'm sure they would love to hear from you one. And everybody came the next morning with a picture, and they were excited to show them off, or they weren't excited, but they still had it. They were willing to engage in the exercise, and we answered 2 questions, or asked 2 questions that the folks then answered. One being, what are you most proud of what are you most proud of with the person in the picture? Like, look at the person, look at this child. What are you most proud of them for? And then the second one is, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give them? And it's such a beautiful ice-breaking exercise, because it immediately gets people into this mindset of everything they had to go through, the things that they've learned, how to distill that down, how to offer it as advice. And honestly, it was one of the first sessions we did, and it ended up being one of the most emotional ice-breaking ones. And this is, by the way, we got this whole structure around vision, mission, values from one of our investors, Joe Musselman over at Broom Ventures.
I love that you guys got personal with this, because a lot of think people aren't willing to do that. And I think if you want alignment, I feel like you need to know people beyond just the work that we do together. Do you feel like that had an advantage to you guys finding the alignment that you have now?
I really do. At the very least, doing a vision, mission, values exercise for yourself personally first helps demonstrate the utility of the framework. And even for the people who weren't able to, get to a place where they're satisfied, and because it's a more than an afternoon's work to figure out what is my personal mission, what is my purpose in life. There's a lot more that goes into figuring that out. But even if they didn't get to a series of answers that they felt was complete, it at least instilled the framework in them, so that when we started talking later about the company's vision, mission, values, it was understood why. Instead of, if you try to do it the other way, or only focusing on the company, you kind of get lost in like the arbitrariness of a framework, and like, okay, cool, we've now nailed it down to 5 words. Aren't these words great? Which can be real empty if there's not a deeper understanding behind it.
Now, Gleb's been talking about personal mission, vision, and values. Now, I love this, and I'm going to give you just a little bit of a sweetener on this, because I've found that one element that you can do that makes this even more powerful, when you understand your mission and your vision for your company, and you have values for the company, for yourself, you want to make sure that you can answer this one question: who do you need to be to make that happen? Who do you need to be? I know it sounds weird. The intention here is for you to clarify the personal traits of who you're being that are in alignment with the future vision of yourself. For example, this podcast has reached 1,000 episodes plus, right? As we put this out, it's beyond 1,000. But I want to make sure that you understand where this came from. Years and years ago, I decided to be consistent. I decided that I would put out an episode once a week, and then it grew to twice a week. Then it was 3 times a week. Then it was back to twice a week, but it was still consistent. I haven't missed a week in over 9 years. I decided in advance to be consistent. Imagine the power of that when you have a mission, vision, and values for yourself or for your people, and you answer the question clearly: who do you need to be to make that happen? And usually it's something different than what you have been being. And so I share this detail with you. It comes directly from my coaching. It's one of the most powerful elements of coaching. You may not quite understand it, because I'm not sure if I'm describing it in the way I connect with my clients, because I don't let them off the hook. I want them to get really clear about it. I'm giving it to you because I'm trusting that you want the secrets. You want the things that I'm using inside my coaching programs to use and see how they come up with yourselves. If you have any questions about this and not working out for you, or you just want to say it did work out for you, then make sure you reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. But for now, just answer the question, who do you need to be? And usually it's not just one word, it's 2 or 3 words. You want to clearly state who you're being as you execute on this vision that you're creating for yourself. Now back to Gleb. Great context there. I haven't thought about it like that. I mean, it's one of the exercises I've done with every client I have about their mission, vision, and values. I take it a few steps further. But Gleb, I want to go back to this, finding alignment. You may not have an answer for this, but I'm just curious, is this something you guys try to measure? Is this something that goes into reviews or whatnot? How are you looking at alignment across the organization today?
Honestly, through productivity. I don't think it necessarily needs to be measured as a metric on its own. I think it's one of those, if you try to measure it, you'd very quickly influence the results in a negative way. I'm blanking on what that law is called, but once a measure becomes a goal, it ceases to become a good measure. I think it's Goodhart's law, maybe. It's a great candidate for a Goodhart law type metric. But my core sort of hypothesis here is the higher the alignment is, the more you get done and the happier the employee base is. Part of that is based on previous employee surveys. We do them like the pulse surveys every quarter or so, and alignment between the exec team, alignment between departments, alignment internally always comes up as something that like gets in people's way. If you're an IC, you're going to be frustrated night and day if the people on your team are working towards different goals, and you're going to be completely incapable of growing your career, getting your stuff done if your departments or your exec teams are not on the same page. So for me, it's you don't need to measure alignment itself as much as you need to focus on making sure there is alignment if you actually want to get something done. So it's about, what I mean by that, just to give an example, is if you're trying to ship a product on whatever date, and that's the goal, then you're going to make trade-offs to achieve it. Can't get everything done by that date. But if you're not aligned internally, then different trade-offs are going to be made. And then there are going to be arguments. And you're going to push the timeline just because people can't agree on what we're doing here. Why would we make that trade-off? That's now at least a day's worth of conversation, probably multiple days, because then some people are off. You have to get their input. Then they come back. Next week, you've set up a meeting. Like, it's a whole thing that throws people off, because a lot of people come in from, okay, is our goal to ship it on this date, or to ship something good on this date? Or is it to ship something good that's used by X amount of people? Is the actual goal to get X amount of people using it by Y date? It's these subtle little changes in language that do really affect how well people work together.
We've been talking about alignment with you, Gleb. Is there anything else that we feel like we need to address to really get the full picture of how alignment has shifted for your organization and why it's so important as you move forward?
Tactically, one thing we did is we moved away from the monthly all hands that we had been doing for the year plus, maybe almost, that we've been doing for almost 2 years. And we moved back to something that we were doing a lot when we were a lot smaller or earlier stage, which was bi-weekly all hands, where we just share all the metrics. When we did it monthly, every department wanted to use it as like, hey, here's all the cool shit we did. Here's the fancy projects we shipped. Look how amazing marketing's lead gen program was. Hey, sales closed this big deal and shipped this. And that's great. Obviously, you want people to feel like they're making a big impact. They're adding into the company's results, all that. But what we lost there was we lost talking about what worked well, what we're doing next, and where the actual issues are. Huge believer in transparency on my end. We share, literally any information you want, whether it's board decks with some, asterisks around like deep financial information. But the theory is, if you treat people like adults, they'll make better adult decisions. And you also can't ask for ownership. I'm sorry, you can't ask for accountability if you don't give ownership first. They're literally two sides of the same coin. And I know I'm going around in a big word cloud here, but where that all ties in around alignment is, if you're getting in front of the whole company as a CEO, you want to talk about, here's what we're doing next, here's why we're doing that thing, and here's where our challenges are that we are going to be fixing over the next 2 weeks. Because then when you come back up again, and to be clear, at our all hands, I do very little talking. It's mostly the departments presenting around these challenges themselves. But when you get up again, you get to say, all right, last time we said this was the problem. We know why we're doing it, but as a reminder, here's why again. Here's what we learned with the thing we tried, and we're still not there. We've learned something. The thing we tried was maybe 10% off, and here's the complication. Now, by saying that out loud, you're making it a lot more safe psychologically for folks to try things quickly, get results, and move on. Because I've definitely found, especially with more junior hires, that people are really trained wrong in schools. They're trying to be perfect, and that's just not how anything works. Like, you've got to try things and fail quickly, and you got to fail a lot of times to learn. It really is the best teacher. Experience is the thing you get after you need it. So fail a couple times. But the other thing is that it keeps building this muscle of iteration. So it's safe to fail, go out and do it, but share what you learned. I should tell everybody what we learned now, because now the whole company is better. We all understand what thing is being done, how smart and great you and your department are because of the things you're doing, and what we're going to do next about it. People really respond well, I found, to having full transparent information, though the exec team under you needs a lot of training to do that, and needs to be aligned around those values themselves internally. Otherwise, people get really scared and anxious to share bad news.
Well, I'll share this with you and the audience as well. One of the things we've studied here in hundreds of interviews with CEOs like yourself is, how do you get people to feel like owners? Well, there's 6 components of that I've kind of mapped it back to. Transparency is certainly one of them. And in fact, many CEOs sitting in the same seat you are would say that that was the most important element for us to be who we are and to perform and scale our company, was the ability to share numbers and strategies openly, good, bad, and basically call themselves remarkably transparent. So Gleb, thank you so much for being here, sharing your wisdom and your perspective of employee alignment.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Wow. Employee alignment. Hopefully those details that he shared around what's going on with us personally and understanding our mission, vision, and values, and being able to do that before we come up with the company mission, vision, and values is a really strong insight. I like that exercise because it puts context around who you are as a person, and then allows you to connect the dots to where the company is and where the company's going. And so I really think that that was a very valuable piece of today's interview with Gleb. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.